Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We're excited this morning to welcome you to the Work Integrated Learning Faculty Panel for Spring 2025 semester. So my name's Orinda Griffin. I'm from the School of Molecular Sciences within the college, and I'm a Will Fellow, and I'll be one of the facilitators today. And next, my colleague, Jennifer.
Yes, happy Wednesday, everyone. My name is Jennifer Donovan, and I'm an associate teaching professor with New College, the School of Math and Natural Sciences with the West Valley campus. I first incorporated work integrated learning in my courses back in 2020 during the pandemic due to a need to increase skills in our students and also collaboration and communication. And not surprisingly, even after the pandemic, these are important and valuable skills. I've also had the privilege of being in a workshop with all of our panelists here. So that is wonderful to see them presenting their projects. And I'm really happy to be a part of this. And we'll get started, I think, on just an overview of Will. Before we do that, I think that we're going to have our panelists introduce themselves in the order per the email. So Erin, Jorge, Maureen, and then Benji. And then we'll get started on some more overview. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Erin Schneiderman. I'm a clinical assistant professor in the School of Community Resources and Development at Watts College on the downtown campus, and I am very happy to be here with you today.
Hey everyone, good morning. My name is Jorge Costa. I'm assistant professor of studio recording and sound engineering in the popular music program that's part of the School of Music, Dance, and Theater, also in downtown campus. And I'm very happy to be here with you today and be able to share some of our experiences.
Morning, everyone. Maureen McCoy. I'm a teaching professor of nutrition in the College of Health Solutions at the downtown campus and excited to see you all here today.
Hello, everyone. I'm Benji. I'm an assistant teaching professor of graphic information technology in the Fulton Schools of Engineering on the Polytechnic campus.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the introductions, all of our panelists. We're so happy that you can contribute today and excited to hear about your projects, your Will projects that you've implemented. So I'm going to share a slide deck. It's just a brief overview of what Will is. Starting share will stop other participants. There's a short message there for me. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about what work integrated learning is for reference. It's basically learning by doing. We know that our students learn better when they have practical experiences. So this information is from our website at elevate.asu.edu. Learning is an action word. And at Arizona State, we are making the initiative to help all students to participate in these types of activities. They get to have industry relevant projects and experiences, part of their classroom experience. A lot of learning happens outside of the classroom, and we want to help integrate all of these things together for students to bring value to their education. So essentially, some of the positive effects that Will has is that students perceive that their education, the value of their education is more when they participate in projects from work integrated learning. We affectionately refer to it as WILL. ASU has to have an acronym. So work integrated learning we'll often refer to in the presentation as WILL. So we also have additional statistics from the power of work-based learning that show us that students' income also is higher. Students report a higher income, $13,000 higher when they participate in activities such as these. And 19% of students say that it's helped them achieve their educational goals. And overall, 7% of people report that they are more satisfied with their career when they have these types of experiences in their undergraduate education. So let's talk about what types of experiences briefly. So job simulations are often used. I've used that in my courses. I've used a Forage project, job simulation in the sciences, but students can also experience in internships, capstones, or clinical or industry experiences, service learning, study abroad, and even large course integrated projects. These are all different types of will. This is not an exhaustive list, but it just gives you an idea of different types of experiences that students can have that you can bring to your students and other faculty have already been successful doing. So Jennifer's going to talk a little bit about talk a little more about what to expect. So what to expect with the panel this morning.
Yes, thank you very much. So our agenda is going to be as follows. So our faculty is going to be presenting their work integrated learning projects. We have 30 minutes allotted for that, so about 7 minutes for each panelist to provide a slide deck and share an overview of their work, their specific work with work integrated learning. After that, we're going to have some Q&A facilitated by myself and Arenda. We have about 35 minutes allotted for that, so from 11:40 to 12:15. And then the last 15 minutes, we are going to allow some questions from our visiting faculty and staff on the call right now. And then we will wrap up with some closing thoughts. And last but not least, what can our attendees expect to hear from our panelists? Well, our faculty will be sharing presentations about their specific WIL projects, share alignment to their course objectives, share some outcomes and some reflections. So without further ado, we're going to get started with Erin's presentation. Thank you.
All right, so thank you so much for having me here today. I will preface my presentation by saying that I am the director of our special event management program. So just by the simple nature of special event management, WIL does work in perfectly to what we are trying to achieve, which is experiential learning. So the type of WIL that I'm going to be talking about today is a capstone. It is a class that we offer, and I'm just going to walk you guys through a little bit about the need that was presented to us. How we fulfilled that need, which if anybody is familiar with Watts College, we are a very solution-based learning college. We take a challenge and we figure out a solution. So we'll talk a little bit about the need, how we addressed a solution, how we marketed the solution, what are the benefits that are indeed connected to WIL, and then just an update on how it's going, because this WIL project did start back in 2022. Sorry about the typo. It was not 20,222. So 2022 is the first year that we kicked off this project. And I do consider it a very successful WIL example that does have sustainability. So the project overview is pretty much the Arizona Cardinals, which, if anybody's not familiar, is our professional National Football League team located here in Arizona, came to me and said, you know, a lot of what we do is successful, but the one area that we really struggle in is hiring game day staff members to fill in our concessions as well as our parking. So that was the need. And this was facilitated by Mr. Sean Mayo. He was brand new to the Cardinals as their Director of Human Resources. And he simply presented. He asked if he could come into my class and present what exactly the opportunity would be. So, of course, I welcomed him with open arms into one of my special event management night classes. And as he started talking, I realized really quickly that this was an idea that we could possibly take and run with as an actual academic class. As a part of our program. So once he was finished with the presentation, I asked if we could meet the very next day. And I said, you know what, Sean, this has the makings for a perfect capstone class in our special event management program. So he agreed. This was a great pipeline for him. And the real challenge wasn't getting him to agree, but the real challenge was figuring out how to take this from an idea to an actual class at ASU. So as anybody who's worked through the system knows, this is not a quick and fast project. A lot of background needs to go into it, but to be honest, a lot of trust as well. I did go back and forth for a long time because if we turn this into an academic class, I was essentially putting all of my trust in the Arizona Cardinals that once we created this class, that they would truly have to make sure they made good on what they were offering our students. So lucky for me, this wasn't an opportunity that was only offered to students at Arizona State University. They created a model to recruit and retain students from all different universities across our city, and actually even U of A as well. So I knew that they had a strong template. I just had to figure out on my end as the instructor how to put it to work and how to make it a 4-credit class. So what did we have to do? Of course, all the back end work was done pretty quickly that spring, knowing that we wanted to launch this class in the fall. It was launched as a temporary class, of course. We had to teach it 2 times to make sure that it was sustainable and we could create that permanent number. So for me, it was creating the syllabus, but really getting the word out. So how did we do that? It was identifying the target markets across our university. Lucky us, we have 150,000 students. So not only did we create this as an in-person class, but it's also an I-course available to Phoenix-based students. We had to be really clear about that because I do have students who sign up all the time that live in different states, letting them know that, unfortunately, this is only a class for students in our state or really in the Phoenix metro area because, of course, of the in-person experiential learning aspect of it. So presentations to different target markets, I really narrowed down students that I think would make a good fit. So our sports business students, our sports journalism students, communication students. But at the end of the day, we realized that because we are offering 3 credits plus an hourly wage from the Arizona Cardinals, it was really a beautiful fit for any student who is interested in sports or interested in just a part-time gig, right? It's not a huge moneymaker, but if you're a football fan, if you want to be a part of the action, if you want to come out to the stadium on Sundays, we did pay by the hour. Social media, of course, was a great catalyst, not only within our school, but also across the entire university. It was added to our major map, which helps tremendously because it does show an academic reason for our students to take the class. And then finally, and probably the biggest element is the year that this kicked off happened to be the year that Arizona hosted the Super Bowl. So that was a huge carrot that I can dangle in front of students that if you join this class, it will be an opportunity to work Super Bowl. So here's some photos. We did a fall time information session, and then here's some of our students all ready to work Super Bowl there on the right. So as far as benefits, I believe I already said 3 credits plus the $16 per hour, transferable skills right into the marketplace, concessions, parking, right? We're not talking about super high level. However, if a student is interested in pursuing a career in sports and events, in tourism, this was a great way for them, as you can see, to get a foot in the door. Also, the Cardinals opened up this opportunity for other events that are held at the stadium. So I believe we've done Beyonce concerts, monster jams, wrestling matches. If there is a need for our concession and parking students to be out at the stadium, they are invited to come and work. The networking for this opportunity has been fabulous. We have students who still keep in touch with each other, keep in touch with me. So that's been really fun. But more importantly, they are really, really encouraged to network with the Cardinal staff that is out there. We do assignments every month. Some are offered by the Cardinals, some are offered by me, just ways for them to earn their hours. They all are targeting the 135 hours, which is in line with our 3 credit obligation. So it's a combination of working, so pre-games, regular season games, postseason, unfortunately, we haven't been a part of. But then also we do have assignments. And then, like I said, it was a cool opportunity to work a Super Bowl that year. So how's it going? Just to wrap up, you can take a look at the enrollment on the first bullet there, and you might say, wow, it's really going downhill quickly, but it actually isn't. We're pretty happy with our numbers. 2022 was a Super Bowl year. 2023 was a Fiesta Bowl year. So I'm sorry, it was a national championship year. 2024, we had a strong turnout, and I have about 14 students enrolled in the class right now. Even more exciting, students who repeat the program, not for course credit, keep elevating their position. So as of last fall, I still have 50 students from the previous 3 classes that are working in departments such as staging, parking, audiovisual, street team, community relations, production, and the youth zone. So it really just shows that as long as you get in there, get your foot in the door, prove yourself as a hard worker, do the grunt work year 1, you will start to elevate to different and more exciting roles. 47 students had the opportunity to work Super Bowl, 20 students worked Fiesta Bowl, and as a result of this program, I have had a 2-year run bringing students to the Super Bowl. We have brought 34 students, many from this very class, to take part in a mega event, which is very exciting, and they really did appreciate the opportunity. Most important for me, this is a pipeline directly into my special event management program because I do have an engaged audience who are interested during the class in sports events, and it's a great way for me to increase my enrollment in those areas. And I believe that is my last slide. Yep. All right. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Erin. We'll go to our next presenter.
I think that would be me. So, hi everyone. Let me share my screen real quick. Can everybody see that? Awesome. So the project that I want to start by saying that I'm fortunate that the popular music program at large was designed around work integrated learning. We just didn't know how to call it. So in the Q&A, I'm more than happy to share other examples that are less complex than the one I'm going to share with you at this point. Now, the one I want to share with you today is a partnership we developed with the company Splice. And the project was to create a sample pack. So let me give you a little more information. So in 2024, we launched this collaboration with Splice, which is the industry-leading platform for royalty-free samples and loops. So basically, a lot of professional music makers nowadays, especially in the pop music scene, electronic music, they use Splice as part of their creative process. So they're a big player in the field. And the goal was to create a brand new sample pack featuring creative work by faculty and students to be distributed in their global platform. The purpose was really to bring students into a real-world professional music production environment and get them hands-on experience with session work, audio recording, engineering, sample creation, and also working alongside Israel Medina and Dylan Wood from Splice's own team, who are leaders in their field. In terms of the planning and direction, the project was actually led by Samuel Pena, who's our assistant director. So I can't claim this is my project. I was part of it, but this was a big collaborative effort led by Samuel. And we started by meeting with the Splice team, talking about the direction of the project, of the style for the sample pack. And then we started scheduling recording sessions, selecting musicians, and developing the pathways for student participation in the process. You can see a few photos of the actual recording session there. For us, I think the most important thing was student integration. Even though most of the leadership was coming from Splice's team and our faculty, our idea was to lead and kind of get out of the way and let our students shine. And they did. So on the recording engineering side, which is my specialty, so I was like a proud father on this part of the project. Student engineers like Melanie Caro, Artemi Buzikdov, Hunter Begay, Maven Medrano, Andrew Murat, Sam Spruce, and others served as assistant engineers during the recording sessions, which were led by myself and Tony Brand. And again, the idea is, Tony and myself were guiding them through the setup process, but they would be connecting microphones, connecting cables, talking to talent, making sure they were comfortable. So all the beautiful things we bring to the classroom and tell them about how to behave and act in a professional environment, well, they did exactly that. On the musicianship side, part of the idea was not to just make it about my student engineers, but also bring our musicians to the fold. So in this department, Raul Llanes, who's not only our piano instructor, but he leads our ensembles, selected a band of students, including Edward Sullivan on bass, Ryan De Benedetti on drums, and Henry James on guitar, to showcase their talent. And they were actually the musicians playing the musical ideas that will become those samples. To my understanding, this has never been done. Splice has released thousands of sample packs. I've never heard one. I've never heard of one pack that was actually created by student players, student musicians. So that was also very special. Um, Now, beyond the playing and the recording, creating a sample pack, it's an incredibly complex process that includes editing, mixing, mastering. So where we're at, so the project is not done. The next stage of the project is to bring in my students of the mixing class and my students of the mastering class to mix and master those sample packs. So what we have planned for next semester is we're going to have the team from Splice providing master classes for my students so they can dive into this very specific job. So a lot of what I already teach them applies, but there's also some specificity to deliverables, to certain techniques that they will acquire, but also it's part of the class. Now, in terms of outcomes and impact, right? Beyond the practical skills and collaborative production and business opportunities with sample licensing, this was turned into learning labs. Bringing Splice's team and mentorship gave them a different perspective. Right now, Popular Music Program is a small program. And until very recently, I was the only faculty teaching anything related to the recording studio. And I was always looking for opportunities for my students to have other perspectives that were not mine. I don't know why it ended. So this was a perfect example of them getting perspective from other professionals, but also put us on the map with Splice, which is already turning into conversations of potential leads for jobs when our students graduate. But also, Splice is based on kind of the gig economy. So what we really want is our students to basically see themselves as music entrepreneurs and see how they can work as teams and produce their own sample packs. There's a lot of people in the music industry nowadays who actually make a good chunk of their income by producing sample packs and selling them through Splice. So the idea is by the time the sample pack is ready, it will be publicly available via Splice. So it's going to be free. So part of the complicated conversations when we started putting this together was the legal aspect of it. Fortunately, the second there's no money exchanging hands, things get a lot easier. So we decided on doing that. So nobody's getting paid. But for us, what's really powerful is for students to have to earn, right? Because this is if they do a good job and their work is selected to be in the sample pack, they will have credit on a project that is available to millions and millions of users of the sample platform. So in terms of work integrating learning takeaways, we really strongly feel this exemplifies the power of work integrating learning by combining artistic creativity, entrepreneurship, and technical skills. So our students will be left with real world credit and experience on a commercial release, deeper understanding of production workflows, professional collaboration, and content delivery. But also is that inspiration and confidence that comes from participating in a project that will be visible. I put here nationally, but this is actually internationally. So the reach is even bigger than that. So I'm not sure how we're doing with time, but I think I've given you plenty of information. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Jorge. That was great. Let's go to our next panelist, Maureen McCoy.
All right. Hello, everyone. Okay. So I'm sure some of you have probably gone to Salad and Go, one of our favorite local salad places that actually have salads at a good price. And we were able, yes, Amanda, thank you. So I teach a community nutrition class. It's nutrition 448, but it does not have many prereqs for it. So students come into this class with varying levels of knowledge, which often can make experiential learning difficult because sometimes there's a lot of pre-prep to get them ready to actually engage with future stakeholders. So one of the hurdles that we had to overcome, and sometimes that pushes your experiential learning towards the end of the semester when you feel that students are actually ready to engage with actual stakeholders. So, overview. I had an existing relationship with Salad and Go. I oversee the Pitchfork Pantry, our little food pantry on campus for all of our students. And we had worked with Salad and Go in the past because Salad and Go also donates salads to different food banks. But in addition to like their food service and community service arms, they also have a nutrition education arm in which they are out in the community educating families and kiddos. They work with St. Vincent de Paul, they work with UMOM, and they typically are working with like a middle school age population. But we had just started talking one day, and they're like, yeah, we're doing this nutrition education. And in my community nutrition class, we talk a lot about in community nutrition, a lot of that is educating the community around you. So it's really nice for the students to get that tangible experience of actually educating actual people and not just their peers, because we know that like a class presentation to like their peers is a very different experience than like people that they actually have to teach. And those people actually need to learn something from what they're going to teach them. So what was nice about this collaboration is that when I've done this assignment in the past, it was kind of like, here's the nuts and bolts of how to create like a lesson plan. Now go do it. And with this, the partner already had a pre-existing lesson plan that was geared towards a population of middle schoolers. So, and they wanted to expand the population that they normally work with. So I'm like, okay, let's have some groups like age this lesson plan up. So we aged it up to like high schoolers. And then some of the other groups aged it down to like a preschool type population. So it was really nice to have a starting point and a starting toolkit that they could basically work off of. So then they weren't starting completely from scratch and they had some ideas to kind of work with already, because they always struggled in the past to like get that starting point and see what could be appropriate in the context of a lesson. So before this started, the summer before the fall semester that I did this, I was able to go out to one of the sites where the Salad and Go people were educating kiddos, and I filmed the educator doing her lesson so the students could kind of get an idea of what it could look like in the classroom. Then we provided the students kind of halfway through the semester. I had kind of been gearing them up for it since the very first day of class, saying like, this is what we're going to do this semester. Isn't this so exciting? And then providing that lesson plan to them halfway through. And then we started kind of taking the baby steps to work through that. The students also had, in addition to kind of a written, like outlined scripted lesson plan, they also had like a slide deck that they could kind of use as a starting point. And they could totally change it, or they could just modify parts of that slide deck to make it appropriate to their population. Once they did that, we scheduled Zoom meetings with the Salad and Go stakeholders. So it was the person who normally teaches the lessons, as well as the like higher up Salad and Go person who oversees the community arm. And the students had to basically present their lesson, and then the Salad and Go stakeholders gave their feedback to the students throughout. And it was it was a nice conversation. They were able to go back and forth on different slides and suggest what they would improve, suggest what was working. So then the students went back, they made the changes that were suggested. And then in class, they did like a small kind of in-class version of their presentation. So the skills that they developed from that, I think the creativity aspect was really great. Actually talking to actual people that would use this product, very helpful for them to see that part of it as well. So just to kind of show on the left, that was kind of the script that the students had. So I put that into kind of a Google Doc that was editable, so then the students could modify that to meet the needs of their population. And then on the right, just some versions of the way that they aged it up or aged it down. So they aged it down with like a little superpower lesson about fruits and vegetables, which was great. The bottom right, that was for like a high school population, as one of their fun activities was to develop like a t-shirt and about a superpower that a, vegetable has. Or so they got creative with it, which was really exciting to see, because sometimes our nutrition students are very kind of clinically focused and they don't think outside the box. So this was a good outside the box activity for them. So I think whenever you start this, I mean, we all have different contexts and different ways. And I think I would never have thought that Salad and Go could turn into something like this. And so that was a cool kind of relationship that we were able to have. I already said kind of having that tangible example is really helpful to start with. The ultimate goal would be to have the students then actually give the presentation to a group of children at UMOM, at St. Vincent de Paul. It's always tricky for me to require anything outside of the class, outside of the normal class time. We know our students are busy, they're working, and then to have to get them all together at a separate time outside the classroom is very challenging. So I'd like to try to, play with that a little bit more in the future, and maybe it's an extra credit opportunity if they are able to get that together. It would be nice to have a really nice recording of what the lesson looks like to be able to provide that to the students, but ultimately it definitely met kind of our goals and objectives for our class, and it really prepared them for future education sessions in the community. And that's it for me.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Maureen, for sharing your project. We have one more faculty member to hear from. Last but not least, we have Benji.
Oh, wow. Let me get my screen here. Can everybody see my screen? Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to talk briefly about GIT 494, which was a design for social change practicum. The goal of the practicum was really to create an opportunity for student-led initiatives that specifically addressed sort of social impact and design for social change. And so we started by putting a call out for the class and having students sort of submit sort of a brief portfolio of their work, but also answer a couple questions about like, why did they want to take the class and why do they feel like this class would be a good fit for them? Mainly because what we were trying to do was to make sure that the students that we accepted into the class were sort of social impact minded and weren't looking for sort of corporate work opportunities, as our program, which has a lot of project-based learning, tends to revolve around that. And we wanted to engage and interact with students that were maybe looking for non-corporate avenues to use their skills that they're developing and learning in class. And so once those students were selected, we started by reviewing sort of the key fundamentals of designing for social change by using a book written by Andrew Shea. And then we had two guests come and visit the class. The first was Jen Stucker, the chair of graphic design at BGSU, who has sort of a long history of designing these sort of projects for social change, particularly in conjunction and collaboration with students. So we wanted to hear her talk about some of those experiences and some of those projects and share that information and knowledge with our students. And then we also had Amy Fidler come visit, who helped co-run and co-create sort of a collaborative design group that would meet once a week over the summer for about 4 or 5 summers and just sort of make something that was social impact driven in a very short amount of time. And we felt it was important to have sort of her knowledge and experience on how to design collaboratively also brought into sort of the fold and the work that we were doing or wanting to do in this class. Once that was done and students sort of had a good grasp of like how this type of work tends to come together, they were sort of given the task of doing some convergent and divergent thinking exercises, mainly to just acquaint them with the types of design thinking models that we often find um, in social design work. And we sort of came to task on an experience that was really common that everyone was sort of familiar with, which was this idea of how do we sort of connect our Bluetooth device to our car. And really, it was in preparation and preparing students for sort of researching and thinking about some social issues that may be affecting America as a whole. And so once that was done, they then went on to research social issues that were affecting America. And then the output of that research, of that sort of those thinking exercises and the information they found, was to basically take an hour under very strict guidelines on the types of imagery that they could create and the tools they could use to do it, to create artwork, right? To create some sort of visual output. The idea here being that like these weren't the most beautiful, well-designed things in the world, but just showing how much ground can be covered when a group of people are sort of collaboratively working towards an outcome given, very concise sort of strict guidelines. And from there, they sort of had all of the tools they needed to start thinking about what is the project for this class going to be? What are we going to build? What are we going to create? And so they started researching all of the social issues that are affecting specifically just the greater Phoenix Valley. This led to some really great insights with some really beautiful sort of like maps about the communities in the valley, the distribution of wealth within the valley, and all other these really great insights about all of sort of the social issues that they were most interested in. And oddly enough, they decided that the social issue they really wanted to tackle in the valley was education. And so they said, we're going to go all in on education. This is the topic that we feel is sort of most important to us, that we sort of most importantly want to speak to, especially with sort of the news about Arizona being dead last in education sort of coming out around the same time their decision making. They felt like this was the place to sort of spend their energy. And so we then set to task on really mapping out what the education systems, resources, and sort of research statistics looked like for the Valley. And so we created this sort of big map of all of the information that we could find about education in Arizona, all sorts of statistics about how much money is spent to educate individuals at all different levels, how often teachers tend to leave education in Arizona, and just a slew of all of this other information. And once all of that was sort of collected and put together, their role was then to sort of ask themselves, what could a project that makes an impact in this area potentially look like, right? And so they set out to ideate and propose a couple different projects. Ultimately, 3 projects were proposed, and then through their deciding fact, through their decisions, they were able to decide which project they were going to choose. And they ended up combining 2 of the projects into one that they ended up calling the Poster Prax project, which was a project that was designed to essentially gather stories about what education means to students who had gone through education in Arizona and the value and importance that those students held into the ability to access education. And then by collecting those stories, they would then pair those stories with statistics and data that they found in the research, and then put out a call to designers, artists, and creatives in Arizona to essentially create posters that would share those stories visually. And then those posters would then be translated onto backpacks that we would auction off at a gallery event on National Teacher Appreciation Day, to then donate that money to Arizona Community Foundation for education funding. But as a result of all of that work, success isn't exactly a guarantee. And so this project was sort of announced as like dead on arrival just this week. The students couldn't garner the engagement from the community despite all of their best efforts to support this project. And so even after about 6 weeks of like sending communications, waiting to hear back, all of our sort of partners that we had identified as opportunities or people that, or institutions or organizations that might want to help with this project just haven't responded. And so now going forward, what we have to decide is, with the time that's given left to us and the resources we have and the knowledge we have, what else can we do to try and make an impact that, even if maybe on a much smaller scale, that involves less people, with sort of what's left in the pieces that are in our hands. And that's sort of where the project is as of today, and will hopefully make its way further towards some resolution by the end of the semester.
Thank you. Thank you to all of our faculty panelists. We'll give them a little round of applause virtually. Thank you, thank you. We are going to move into the next section, which will be questions. And at the very end, we will still have time for a Q&A questions from the audience. Jennifer, did you want to add anything?
No, that's great. Yeah, so we'll have some general questions to ask all of the panelists. And then if we have some time afterwards, we have some more specific questions, because these were just amazing projects and they're just amazingly diverse and reaching out to so many students. So thank you. So we'll have obviously Arenda ask our first question, and then I'll follow with the next one, and we'll kind of go from there. Thank you.
We appreciate so much you explaining your projects and implementing the project at a high level, and your honesty and transparency in that as well. And I understand that a lot of the courses receive a letter grade, and that's one way to measure student learning objectives. But the question I have for the panelists, and feel free to just jump in if you'd like to answer the question. And we do have time for multiple panelists to answer the same question. But the first question I have is regarding student learning outcomes. So what are some effective ways that you assess student learning and performance in these WIL projects? Yeah, Erin.
I guess I can go first. One thing that's really important to me, because I'm not directly supervising our students every single step of the way, is for them to make sure that they're comfortable communicating with me if any issues are arising. So in addition to our assignments, I also have them complete a monthly report. Each report is just asking 3 questions. Number 1 is, are you on track with your goals? Number 2 is, what's something that went well this month and something that didn't? And, as a professor, I'm able to read between the lines and see if there's anything in there that I need to step in on, which things are not always perfect, right? They could end up with a coworker that they don't really like, or a supervisor that's not nice to them, or, right? We still have to treat this as a class, even though it is in the real world. This is what, a career might look like, where you might not always have, great people surrounding you. But I still wholeheartedly feel that these are my students, and I need to make sure that I'm offering a comfortable environment for them. So the monthly report to me is one way that I really do gauge success, and it tells me everything, because students know that it's anonymous and I'm only going to take action if I have to. Other than that, they'll get a grade, points and hours towards the entire class. So that's something that I probably couldn't do without, because it does tell me a lot regarding student satisfaction.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. So an anonymous monthly report. That's one strategy. That's perfect. We know part of the learner's journey is reflecting on their experiences. That really is what helps them to gain the value. So I like that strategy and idea. Any other panelists want to comment on what they do to measure student learning and performance?
Yeah, I'll take a go. This isn't the only class that I do project-based learning in. And so each class where I do project-based learning, there's always sort of a peer review for any group work, but also a self-review for any like individual sort of like project-based learning. And so most of the time, the types of questions that we're sort of asking or assessing there is like, how was your peers or yourself sort of participation in the project? And I think that's sort of important to sort of set the ground for, because I think that it usually tempers a lot about sort of what the rest of the sort of self-review is going to reveal, right? Like if they mark their own sort of participation or like willingness to contribute as being low, then like there's probably a good chance that the rest of what they're going to say is probably maybe skewed a little more towards the negative. And then from there, it's just about assessing like what did you learn and how do you think that that applies to your career or the work that you will do after you graduate. And then also, like how effective do you feel that you were in the role that you chose for yourself and that or that you agreed to do amongst your peers, right? And that piece I think is really important as well because it sort of is for some students the first time that they're assessing like in a real way like what are my strengths and my weaknesses. And for the students that often pick like I want to take on the project manager role, a lot of the feedback is either wow this went really well and I was really impressed with myself, or like holy crap I'm never doing this again, I don't want to be a people manager. But if you don't create that opportunity to sort of have that reflection, it might be they're in their career facing the opportunity to get a promotion that they might not even know that like I don't want this role or I don't want to be in a position to manage people. And so having that experience and that ability to reflect on that is super, super important.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Mindy. I agree that those prompts are very thought-provoking and it's really going to help students to understand the value of their experience. So peer review and self-review. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, George.
So, for better or worse, the music industry is very particular in the sense that the piece of paper actually doesn't matter that much. The experience to get there, definitely. But when people hire people in the music industry, they don't ever look at a GPA. So, what we've been doing that I think has been very effective is create instances of feedback that is non-academic. So, a couple examples for the capstone projects, which in most cases are the first professional project that our students use to launch their artistic career. I do not grade them. I'm not part of that structure, but I do provide office hours where I can give them honest feedback as a professional without then having to worry about the potential implication in a grade. So that's been very efficient because then they're not concerned. They can take really strong, direct critique and build upon that without thinking this is going to lower my grade. The other thing that's been really fantastic is we've been able to bring let's say, clients to certain situations. So, for instance, I have a recording class, and every time I can, I find, let's say, session musicians that have a client that wanted them to record an instrument. I bring them to my class. So, my class is an actual professional recording session where there's a client involved. Sometimes we even bring the artist. So, by the time my students are done and they participate as assistant engineers, the only question I give to the musician and the artist, how was your experience? Because I always tell my students, this is a service industry. Even though it's highly technical and artistic, it's a service industry. So if the artist and the musician, they're happy, they have a good experience, they would come back, you did a great job. We can discuss technical details later, but that to me would be the main takeaway. What I love about that is two things. It's made me realize that I think we're doing a pretty good job in educating them as human beings, not just as professionals. But also the feedback they get from somebody who, again, is not attached to a grade, is not their own faculty, has a really, really strong impact. And thankfully, so far, it's been really positive.
Wow, yes, yes, we appreciate that. I mean, having a feedback source that's non-academic, I think is beneficial to students and for them to reflect on the artist's satisfaction, I think is really key. So thank you. Thank you so much, George. We're going to move on to another question from Jennifer.
Great, thank you so much. And thank you for those responses. As you know, work integrated learning is sometimes new for some of our faculty. And I notice that many of you have some really unique connections for these projects. So as you may be aware, some faculty may need some assistance in starting up work integrated learning projects in their courses. And Arenda did mention, for example, the use of Forage in some classes. There is also Ripen. So to this, what resources or support systems have you found most helpful in these WIL projects? Just let me know who would like to answer. Maureen, go ahead. Thank you.
I'll start. I have used Ripen. Hello, Stephen. I see your Ripen. And Ripen is a fantastic database of companies that want students to help them. So they already crossed that hurdle for you, and it's a really fantastic way to connect to people across the world, literally. And that's been really nice for like my ASU online courses. Um, for some of my on-ground courses and sometimes online courses, our college keeps kind of a database of internship opportunities for students. And even that can be like looking at those locations could be someone that you could reach out to. And just other people that people have collaborated with. Our college keeps like kind of a running list of people and of contact email addresses. And even that could be a place to start that if your college has some type of repository of connections that you have already been established.
Yes, I would agree that definitely collaboration and just kind of the old school word of mouth, communicating with individuals that have also created work integrated learning projects. That's why I think it's just wonderful to have all of you sharing this because the skills, the work is really where we're impacting our students. Anyone else want to chime in with this? Go ahead, Jorge. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen, for sharing what you just did. And as contrast, right? So popular music is a very, I would say, unacademic environment just because we don't have academic tradition. So our sources really come mostly from our faculty being active in the industry and their personal connections. Thankfully, we've been very fortunate that, again, what we offer in Arizona is very unique. So every connection we've made with music industry in the state have been incredibly generous and very excited to participate, to come to share with the students. So I think this also personal connection also brings this, I don't know, another layer that allows a more direct human connection between the students and the people we bring in because the faculty is already a personal connection there. I think that approach with what Maureen just shared, I think a mix of like data-based industry partners, but also the industry connections that come from faculty being active in their industries can be kind of a perfect salad.
Yes, thank you, Jorge. I noticed in particular with your project is that you were able to have multiple faculty involved. And I was curious, just a quick follow-up question on that. How were you able to incorporate their assistance with this project?
Uh, well, I'm going to start by not taking credit for it because it really was Samuel that led the project. But I think, look, popular music is collaborative by nature, and even again before we even knew what work integrated learning was, we're constantly talking about ways to get our students to collaborating projects across different classes. So where we could have student musicians play in recording sessions recorded by student recording engineers, mixed by student mixers, etc. So this collaborative nature is already embedded in the program. So I think when it comes to bringing larger projects, fortunately, it's been very easy to have people say, "Yes, I'm in." Like, let's just figure out how to collaborate. So I would say communication and willingness might be the two key factors right there.
Thank you. Before we go on to potentially one, maybe two more questions, is there anyone else that would like to address that question before we move on to another question from Miranda? All right, seeing no one. Miranda, do you have another question to ask?
I do have a question, and Maureen, you mentioned this in your presentation, and perhaps you can speak to it in depth for another faculty panelist. But um, sometimes students don't know what to expect from this project. And you mentioned that you do like a gearing up for it and let students know, this is the project that you're going to participate in. So the question is, what strategies have you found effective in preparing students for the WIL experiences?
Yeah, I mean, I really do start on day one after we talk through the syllabus, and I really start selling it and how cool it is from the very first day of class. And then we I do try to break it up into smaller pieces. It's not, I mean, I'm sure we all do that. Like, it's not everything all at once. So, I think showing like the video of like, here's what it looked like in the classroom, and then here's kind of one piece of it, and here's another piece of it. And I think just kind of dropping those little nuggets and a lot of visuals, because we know our students need to be able to see it to believe it. I think that's helpful, and then they start, they can get more excited from that.
Maybe Erin, you can speak to that because your project has a lot of outside the classroom requirements. How do you prepare students for those out of classroom experiences?
Yeah, thank you, Renda. This has really been an uphill battle for me over the last few years because pretty much what could happen is a student could just be scrolling through our ASU classes, stumble upon it, and just enroll in it without any background information. So, a few things I've implemented. Number one is also my syllabus. The very top of my syllabus is highlighted in huge black letters, and it says, "This class is not for everyone. Please read on for more information." Because I want full transparency. Any student who's taking this class, I want them to know exactly what they're signing up for. So what does that mean? That means reliable transportation. They either need to drive themselves or carpool out to Glendale for class, which is not everyone at all, right? We know that students sometimes don't have transportation. Number two is, unfortunately, the Arizona Cardinals cannot pay international students because, again, they are the employer, and this has been a really big one. So I have to really focus on CPT and starting very early if you think that this is you. And that's also a battle because some students think that this is an ASU student worker position, which it is not. So educating them on, what the financial implications are and what you actually do need to prove the ability to get paid. Some students will say, well, I'll just volunteer. And unfortunately, this is not a volunteer opportunity. My next step is an orientation that happens sometimes on our first or second day of class because I want to give students the opportunity to drop the class if it's not for them. So they come out to the stadium, which is their first shock and reality that I-10 is very busy at 5 p.m. They have to find the stadium on their own. They have to figure out how to get in. And sometimes to a student, that's like super overwhelming. So maps and instructions and everything they need. And then I take them through an ASU orientation first. Then the Cardinals give them their orientation. So they're getting everything now that is expected of them on the first or second day of class, and then it's up to them. One thing, I was always trying so hard to have enrollment of like 100 or 75 students, and now my ultimate goal is never to beg, never put any pressure on a student to be in this class. They have to want to take this class because they actually want to take it based on how it is. Because if I let them in the class and 2, 3 weeks in, they're like, this isn't what I thought it was, then that's a problem, right? Because we've wasted time. They couldn't take another class. So I'm very transparent from the beginning of what to expect.
Wow, great strategies, great strategies. Instead of, doing instructor consent or something that restricts students from the beginning, let them enroll, and give them the opportunity to know what they're getting themselves into. I imagine other projects that are, like internships that are for pay may run into similar obstacles that you have with international students. And that's a great strategy, CPT. I hadn't thought of that. So it sounds like syllabi and letting students know upfront as early as possible are some of the strategies that have been effective for you all. I did see one question in the chat that was directly related to you, Erin, about the Cardinals. What has been the feedback or reaction from industry employers? Okay, so we'll save that question since it's more specific. And then if anyone else wants to answer strategies that they use, Um, if not, we'll get one more question from Jennifer, and then Allie will come back to your specific question that's for Erin. Thank you so much. Those are great strategies that everyone suggested.
Yes, thank you. I was going to ask a question because in speaking with lots of faculty, depending upon departments and schools, there may be a bit of resistance to work integrated learning projects related to evaluations. And then, of course, we know that research shows that students find projects in which they can get paid more valuable for lots of reasons. There's research to show that. So I was curious to hear everyone's thoughts on how they have, if they've encountered any resistance, what have they done about that? How have they responded? Or how have you pivoted? For example, I know we mentioned extra credit as a possibility, and I can personally attest that I had to change one of my projects to extra credit as a result of that. So I wanted to share that I've also had that experience. So curious to hear everybody's thoughts on any sort of resistance from faculty in regards to work integrated learning projects and how you've navigated around that.
I'll start.
Thanks,
I
Maureen.
think we all love it so much that it's hard for us.
Right?
Why would you be resistant to this? This is great. I think the workshop that a lot of us were part of in a previous summer, like we've talked about that, and because it is work up front. It is work ahead of the class to get all the pieces in place. But the hope is once you do that, like this is something that we can do semester after semester, and then the lift isn't heavy. I mean, working with Ripen is not even a lift. Like they make it so easy to just set up your class and connect with employers. Like it really is not heavy at all. I think it was a little bit heavier trying to figure out logistically how it would work with, like Salad and Go or whatever, and just kind of figuring out the steps. I think too, like the extra credit piece of it, if there are parts of it that are essentially like outside of class time, that's where it always gets a little funky, like I said in my presentation. So I think those expectations need to be very clear from the start what that does look like. And with Erin, like clearly that's like this is what the hours are that you are outside of the classroom. But for like a hybrid class, like my class, like they're in class one day a week, the other hours are essentially online. So they did have to meet with the stakeholder outside of class time. Not all of the group members were able to do that via Zoom. So we did record the Zoom meeting, and then the other group members were supposed to watch said recording afterwards, and then they had to make the changes that the stakeholders asked for, and then I scored them on the changes that they made. So that was kind of one piece that had to happen outside of the class. But there may have to be that small pivot if there is a large piece of required outside time where you kind of figure out what that looks like, perhaps in the form of extra credit.
Thank you, Maureen. Yes, I definitely agree that including it up front in the syllabus, aligning it with course objectives, outcomes, however you can, has been super helpful. I've learned that from my own personal experience. Ripen is a great app. I can also share that when I first started with Ripen in 2020, I had 250 students and I had like 6 or 7 projects going on, and it was a huge lift. And I learned from the experience. I think we all learn, obviously, from our experiences, and I've obviously refined the project. So, in regards to that, obviously, still have the same question, but I was curious if anyone had to refine their project as they've been doing them, and how have they done that? Anyone? Go ahead, Jorge. Thank you.
I think in our case has been identifying the benefits that the students find important to themselves. So obviously, when there's money, that's an easy one. That's low-hanging fruit. And we have an internship program within our recording studios, which is that again, that's an easy sell because they get further training in something they love, and when they show a certain amount of knowledge and experience, they become, as student employees, actually available as assistant engineers in paid recording sessions. So that's been really successful. At the same time, when we have smaller instances or smaller projects, what I started implementing that made a big difference is something as simple as giving them credit for their work. The music industry is really based on reputation. And, again, a good grade doesn't mean anything. Having a credit in a record means a lot. So I just had, for instance, recently a situation where I was able to bring a recording session to my classroom on a song that just got released 2 days ago. And in the official credits of that song, every single one of my students is credited as assistant engineer. And one of them, actually, I upgraded them to engineers because they went so above and beyond that, to me, it's important to show also that we recognize their efforts, right? So you showed up, you helped, assistant engineer, that's already good enough. But you showed up 2 hours earlier and you actually did half of the work. So I'm actually going to bump you to engineer credit because you earned it. And I think that generates kind of this maybe trust that if we recognize their efforts and those efforts have a value for them, that again creates this desire for more of that.
Absolutely.
I'll just add one thing, Jennifer. I was going to mention that sometimes that is a challenge, a heavy lift, and I have seen in my department, particularly in the sciences, and you've been able to overcome that. That a lot of the pushback I get is that the courses are too content heavy. A lot of faculty think that there just isn't space in their course to implement this project. It lends itself nice to nutrition maybe or musicians, but a lot of times there's some pushback from faculty for those reasons. And if you have additional questions on how to navigate those challenges, Jennifer and I'd be happy to help.
Absolutely. And I wanted to give either Erin or Benji an opportunity to answer any of the questions posed here as well, or any thoughts before we've got about 5 minutes before we go into our Q&A with other individuals on the call to ask questions.
Yeah, I think that the example I shared even right now is like an example of how do we course correct in process, right? Like it was really important to me that this be a student-led initiative from top to bottom. So I didn't do a lot of preparatory work that I would typically do for a work integrated learning project about like, finding partners and finding resources. Like I really wanted it to be something they built from scratch, in part because I knew that like it sort of not being a success would be a possibility. Like that was very much from the beginning a completely viable outcome of the work. But I wanted the students to have that experience because it's particularly in the design world. I'm sure Jorge knows similarly about music. Like you can put in all this work and all this effort and do all this stuff, and it just nothing comes of it, right? Like its end life might be like it's a file on your MacBook for the next decade. It's quite literally a possible outcome of any sort of creative work. And so it was important to me that that element of like this thing could fail was a part of that. And in this instance, it was. And so I was sort of obviously still frustrated and disappointed, right? There's probably a million and one factors as to the reason why my students really couldn't get the community to engage with us. I'm sure everything going on in the world is part of that. I'm sure like them picking education in a time where like we've got an administration trying to dismantle education is also a part of that. And so like there was just a lot of reasons I think that the community could be like, I don't really want to do anything I don't want to touch that project. I don't want to touch that idea. And so as disappointing as that was, it still allowed us to have that space and with the students where I was like, okay, like who's mad? Everybody raised their hand. I'm like, who's frustrated? Like, who's disappointed? Who's upset? And I'm like, all of those things are completely valid. But now what do we do with that? Right. And they just kind of sat there silently. I'm like, like, guys, what do we do with this? Like, what do we do with these feelings? Do we just give up? Do we like throw our hands up and say, okay, well, at least we tried, and like now the grant money we have just sort of goes away and we don't use it? And every single one of them was like, no, absolutely not. We have to come up with something else. And I was like, okay, well then what's something that we can do just us that still might have an impact if we share it with others? And so being able to use that like mistake, or that like it didn't work out, as an opportunity to be like, okay, now what? And help guide the students towards a new now what, has been really, really rewarding. And I think that you could do that in any way along the line, in long sort of a work integrated learning project, even if it's like you're recognizing it's going to mess up or not work out. How do you then sort of bring that same idea of like, how do we make this a thing that can still be valuable in the moment?
Yes, absolutely. And what I noticed, what kind of struck me in regards to your slides is you had on the last slide, success isn't always the outcome. And, the reflections and learning from the experience and validating the feelings and the thoughts of the students is extremely important, in particular for creating lasting change for sure. Erin, we have about a minute. I just didn't want to leave you out if you wanted to make any last comments
Yeah,
before
I'll
we
jump
go.
in less than a minute. So, for me, the Arizona Cardinals and their partners are really driving this class. So, as they see issues and they want to make changes, they're not exactly asking me what I think, but I have to jump in and say, hey, I realize that you're doing this differently. This is how it's going to affect me. So, I'm kind of always on them, and that kind of annoying, person that's in their ear, like, well, if you do that, it's going to affect me in this way. I also have to realize that maybe my 30 students are a part of 100 total students who are in this program. So for me, probably the biggest change was the program was originally designed as a rotational program where students got a little taste of all different areas. And I think after year one, they realized it just wasn't happening. It was too much time and training. And we had students getting food handlers cards that were actually working in the parking lot. So what they did over the last few years was really have our students select an area they wanted to work in for the entirety of the season. And then if they repeated the next year, then they can self-advocate for a different department they wanted to work in. Again, it was easy for me to pivot, and I'm kind of used to it, to be honest. I just have to go with the flow as I see changes coming in, and really it's not a huge lift for me to spot a change and figure out how we can still make it work because it is a strong partnership.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to switch to our Q&A section, and we'll have Arenda start with our first question from our audience. Thank you.
And that actually was a great segue, Erin, the way you answered that question, involving the partner, and they may make changes, but we definitely want to, keep the relationship strong. So with that in mind, Allie's question is, what has been the feedback or the reaction from industry partners? For instance, Arizona Cardinals, Splice, Salad and Go, with these student employer connections. So what is the feedback from the industry partner about this student employer connection? I guess, I don't know if any of the attendees here, Stevens from Ripon, may be able to speak to that too, but we'll start out with Erin. Maybe you could tell us how they perceive the connection.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, it is extremely flattering to be invited back year after year. It is a partnership that I work on all year because, as we know, when that course catalog is ready to come out, I have to be ready to say, yes, we are offering that class. So when the season ends, a lot of thank yous. We appreciate everything. I give them a little bit of space, but then, come March, hey, just want to make sure we're having this class again. And then come May, once the schedule is released, we really start working together over the summer. I think my numbers speak for themselves. When you can see that like more than 50 students are still working for them, it's achieving exactly what they hoped for. And that was a pipeline for game day staff to be working for them, but also wanting to do it year after year. It cuts down on their recruiting and their training. And they also have students that are interested in being there, not just there for the paycheck, which I can't say for everybody out there. So I think it's been a great success, and we'll keep riding it until I hear otherwise.
Diamondbacks next, right?
That would be
Yeah.
great.
Georgia, if you could talk about Splice, because that's a big company.
Yeah, it's an ongoing project. So I can speak of where we at right now, but it's been very positive. So we already did the recording sessions, which were just a lot of joy. They were really fun. The people from Splice really had a fantastic time. But also it was not just that, kind of maybe they're just being nice with us, but basically the conversation led into, okay, now what? So where we're at right now is, there's this whole process of selecting, editing, mixing, mastering, which is a ton of work. And now the conversation is, uh, how do we take that next step? So the fact that they want to take that next step already speaks volumes. Because if the first step had not been good, they don't want to waste their time. They want to invest their time. So in this case, we're already figuring out how to integrate, for instance, mixing this type of material into the advanced mixing class I have next semester. So it's not going to be the whole class, but it's going to be a part of it. And then they offered to jump in and give them a master class. So I think this collaborative spirit to me is what tells me that we're on the right track. And I also know they were actually curious about even our student musicians potentially being available to be hired for other projects outside because they were very impressed by them.
Yeah, and that's one of the next questions. So keep that thought in mind. Maureen, did you want to say anything about the Salad and Go's experience with us?
Yeah, they just were really excited to get new creative voices into the lesson plan with, people who are connected a little bit more to the audiences that they wanted to start reaching out to high schoolers. Like some of our students were not too far away from that age. So to be able to connect and give some new ideas and life to it, they were really excited about. So positive feedback.
Alyssa, did you want to add something from Ripen?
Yes, I'll jump in. Hey everyone, if I haven't met you yet, my name's Alyssa. I'm the Educator Success Manager at Ripen. I see a few faces on this call, folks I'm familiar with. My colleague Stephen Henn is with me as well. So Stephen is joining as Partner Relations Manager. So you'll probably be seeing lots of us. In terms of feedback that we get from employers about the students' work on project, it is almost overwhelmingly positive. I think that speaks to the collaborative work that educators tend to make along with whoever the employer is. And so at ASU specifically, we also do see a number of repeat collaborations. So Jennifer, I know with your class, you'll work with the same employer a number of times. That's the same with a few other professors that we've collaborated with. I think it also depends on the industry that the employer is in. Many of the folks are in kind of startup situations where what they find really valuable is an outside perspective on, their marketing, their business strategies, things like this. So that can be a really great way to get students' ideas into a place where they make a difference. With that being said, though, we also do have employers who have given feedback on things like, project management, geology experiences, depending on what it is. And there have been circumstances where the students will then be hired afterwards. Ultimately, though, I think it does come down to really like the educator's role in shaping out what that experience looks like and creating that partnership with the employer.
Thank you for that input from the other lens. Appreciate that. We have one additional question in the chat.
Yes, and I know that Erin and Jorge mentioned this, so feel free to elaborate. And of course, Maureen and Benji, please chime in. So this question comes from Amanda. Have you seen or can you share any examples of students gaining other opportunities as a result of their participation in the WIL experiences? For example, an internship or employment? Go ahead, Jorge.
I'm going to start with one that's actually been internal, but I think probably one of the most satisfying ones. So, as part of the capstone projects, one of maybe the pressure points for student artists is that their capstone is the first time they put their music out into the world professionally, and they want to be, they want to be competitive. Now, sometimes students have budgets and have been able to hire outside professionals to, let's say, mix and master their music and help them in that process. Um, but what has started happening, and which was a nice surprise, is that after sharing with other students who are, part of my classes in recording and mixing mastering and having good experiences with them, now we're having projects that have been fully done by students, everything, the recording, the editing, the mixing, the mastering, that are going to be released in Spotify in the next couple of weeks. And again, it was kind of a beautifully unintended side effect because in my experience, when I went from student to professional, it would take years to be able to call yourself a recording engineer, a mixing engineer that actually gets a credit for your work. So the fact that I have students that will graduate with actual credits, and that all came from student-student collaboration, right? It's not precisely the industry partner route, but I think there's something really powerful about this collaborative entrepreneurial spirit that comes with these opportunities.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. And I do know, Erin, I saw that you have students that have been working with the Cardinals after the project. How has that gone?
Yeah, so my main contact at the Cardinals actually was one of our sports law students when she took the class, and now she's actually working in HR. She wasn't in my class because that was the pilot year, but she has been instrumental because she actually went through the program, so she knows what it's like on both sides, and that's why she's kind of the perfect middleman. Like I showed on my last slide, we do offer the opportunity to roll up your sleeves, do the grunt work in year one, but then tell us what you're interested in. So it really is student serving to the point where if you're interested in journalism or you're interested in VIP hospitality, tell us what you want to do. And I think our students really like that because we're getting to know them and their interests, and it keeps them in the program. Of course, they can't repeat the class for credit, but it's great to know that we're helping them kind of pave a path for their future. The networking is second to none. They link in everybody across the board at the Cardinals. It's just a really great opportunity because the Cardinals know at the end of the day they're still students and they're doing their best to try to connect them to their passion, and that's a big part of what I'm always preaching to our students as well. So, the partnership in this situation is everything. Our school is very focused on community as well, so it really helps shine a light on who's in our community, and then opportunities like this bring out different companies that are interested in working with us as well. So yeah, I'm really happy with the outcomes that we've seen on the partnership aspect of it.
Yes, when I hear about so many of these experiences, I get a little jealous and wish I had had that experience as an undergrad for sure. I think this is amazing. I mean, we're changing lives here. Maureen or Benji, do you have anything else to add in regards to that last question?
Several of my students who have done different Ripen projects have been hired by the Ripen partner that they were partnered with. So, and they're like, "Hey, I get to continue on. I got a job," right? So that's the ultimate goal. So that's always exciting to see that it was such a positive experience that they were able to continue on in a paid role.
Yes. Yeah, Alyssa said, yay, that's so great. That is awesome too, because I think that increases employer buy-in as well, because, it's a win-win for students, for employers, for organizations, for faculty. Absolutely. Any other thoughts on that question?
Just kind of in summary, I think, we've demonstrated just the power of will, the power it has on the industry side with recruiting students, the power it has for students. It enhances their self-efficacy. It gives them this sense of belonging. It gives them, outside experiences that definitely can improve their career. And ultimately, it increases persistence. Students perceive the value of their education as higher, and they're more likely to graduate and persist to graduation when they participate in experiences such as these. So it's our job to make this just a fabric of who we are, part of the charter. How can we have every student participate in these types of experiences? Jennifer, anything in summary for our wrap up?
Well, there's just so many questions about these specific projects that kind of pop into my mind, and I wish all of you continued success. I hope that everyone learned that work integrated learning is not just one thing, that there is just so much diversity with the projects, and that we do have tools within ASU such as Forage or Ripen, or our own schools networking, and then networking with individuals or companies that we already know, such as Salad and Go or the Cardinals or musicians, other faculty. So I think that the possibilities are truly endless. And I really want to thank all of our panelists for sharing these projects, for sharing their reflections on it, and for continuing to push through with work integrated learning, because we're all in this space because we see the profound value that it has for our students. Like I'd said, I came out as an undergrad, for example, unable to write back then a cover letter or a resume because I never learned how to do that. And so these are such valuable skills, having students gain employment, gain experience, gain perspective, be, included as engineers on projects. This is just phenomenal. So a really special thanks to Erin, Jorge, Benji, and Maureen for sharing everything with us. Thank you so much.
One last thought, George?
Yeah,
Yes.
one idea I wanted to share is maybe a thought slash invitation. I think maybe the next frontier is to create this cross discipline. I think one thing I've been really kind of dreaming of in what we're doing in terms of bringing work into the classroom is to see more collaboration across disciplines, across schools. Like I would love to see design students help my students design the cover of their music, or maybe I don't know, somebody that needs music for their project and have a student write the music for their project in other scenarios. I think that would take this to a whole different level, because now we create it's almost like a small version of the real industry, right? Which is interconnected within the context of education.
Absolutely, that's powerful. And that's definitely, I think, the next challenge, the next horizon for work integrated learning. So excellent way to end it. So without
So
further
much,
ado,
everyone, for being here.
thank you.